All right, so do you want to pull that up real quick?
Okay. So we had. Let's talk a little context first and make it loaded.
Yeah. So this, I don't want to offend anyone or make anyone upset, but we just wanted to address this because we saw this kind of developing this weekend, and basically someone out there has proposed that, and I'm just by even talking about it, we're going to bring more attention to it. But I think it's worth it.
Well, let's just talk about like what, how you can compare.
Well, let me first just talk about what. So someone out there has proposed of getting 3 or 4 different cars with 3 or 4 different tunes on them. These are different cars with possibly different modifications, and has offered to dyno them at their shop so that the world can see the comparison of how does IE and 034 and APR and Unitronic compare to each other.
For the good of the community.
For the good of the community. So this is well intentioned. I don't think anyone is trying to, hurt anyone or be bad. And supposedly this person doesn't even sell off the shelf tuning. And so I mean, if I'm being honest, I don't know this person. I haven't spoken to this. I imagine there's an element of they're interested themselves. There's an element of wanting to help the community out. And this certainly is bringing a lot of attention to them and putting them at the center of, some type of spotlight. So there's some benefit there as well. But the kind of the core fundamental problem that we see with this is you cannot do a valid, forget scientific, just a valid comparison of 2 or 3 different cars or any cars to each other and draw any kind of firm conclusion on how is that tune performing on its own. The only way to do this correctly would be to have, one car. Start with one car. The modifications do not change on the car throughout. And then you would flash each car with the different tunes, and preferably you do it all in the same day as quickly as you could back to back. And then you would control and normalize for temperature and any other environmental changes during the test.
Even same day, you have to go up. We do this all the time with our calibration and our back to backs. You have to go up and then back down the same route. So as the day progresses, what you never have the same conditions throughout the day.
But different cars make different power, and so we're gonna show you just something that we measured recently. This is right off something that we did.
Yeah, this is in the last couple of weeks. We had a fresh example. When we were baselining RS5 stuff, we had a couple of different RS5s that we've tested over the course of the last couple of years for hardware products and whatnot. And we have seen a huge delta in stock powers on stock cars, stock calibration.
We talked about this before. It's not the first time we've seen it.
As controlled as you could get across multiple cars. As an example of what we're kind of dealing with, so I can make it bigger here so I can read the numbers. It's going to be hard to see. This is like straight off the dyno from this morning.
But just describe,
Yeah. So, you're seeing like almost 20 wheel or over 20 wheel horsepower difference on some of these between stock cars.
These are 2 stock cars with the same.
There's 3 stock cars here. 3 different cars.
3 cars. Okay.
We're looking at a peak of 422 wheel on. 422 torque, 387 torque, and 405 torque. 401 wheel, 363 wheel.
Yeah. So what's the variation on that?
It's variation stuff because it's pick your peak.
No, but at the peak, let's just talk peak power.
Yeah, we're talking at least 30 wheel.
So there's a 35 wheel spread between 3 different cars. Now these are all, and again, these are identical stock cars with the same wheels and tires. This is the other thing is wheels and tires, well, especially tires, make a big difference. So if you take a car, and let's say you have 50 series sidewalls, and then you do a run, and then you immediately swap it out with some 20 series sidewalls, it's going to change the power delivery. That's the saying where the rubber meets the road. All that power goes through that tire. So that tire is the only thing connecting the dyno roller to the torque being produced in that engine. Yeah. And so even if you change the air pressure in that, it will change. And we know this well because we used to do dyno competitions, and we got really good at figuring out what tire and what pressures to bring. So, again, if this particular person had these 3 cars show up, you're going to tell me that you can do a valid comparison on a 35 wheel spread from stock, and then you're going to amplify that with tuning.
And yeah, right. Tuning and whatever mods, whatever changes have been made, whatever I had another example here. We had a B9.5 S4 that we were doing some calibration validation on that had a small boost leak we ended up finding out at the end of things. So we're chasing our tails, working on power deviation stuff. Come to find out it was a hardware issue with the car that was undiagnosed and wasn't enough to throw a code. It was,
Yeah.
it was
Well, then there's that too on top of that. And then I think another factor is I've heard basically whose dyno is it being done on? Like their dyno,
It's their dyno
who's essentially a type of competitor to all these shops.
to some degree.
You know, it's not an independent
right.
test by any means.
No,
Yeah.
there's spec or there's some scare.
Yeah, there is some conflict of interest. Not saying it's full. I mean, it's not like this testing's all being done at integrated engineering, but you have someone who possibly has a vested interest in the outcomes of these tests. And I think this person has also been pretty outspoken about the quality of off-the-shelf tuning.
Yeah, they liked the latest one was like I think it was a 10-year-old could provide some calibrations.
That's what this person said?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the person who's doing these tests said that a 10-year-old.
Yeah, it's that level of
Wait, can we hire these 10-year-olds? Oh, yeah, that was great. I'd love to hire about 10-year-olds to come do tuning for us. That'd be amazing.
So I mean, whatever,
I have two myself.
whatever they may or may not think that it's not it's really hard to make it a truly independent at any level type of test with that level of
It's
outward hostility towards everyone else in the market.
It's not an independent test, no matter what they try to do. Now, with that said, if anyone would like to reach out to us to get our input on how to do this, at least, with some level of validity, we'd be happy to talk to you about it. I think as it stands, the way this is being conducted, who knows? Maybe our tune comes out on top. But I would say we wouldn't recognize or support the results of
We're
this.
not going to run around trumpeting it that anything.
Even if we're the highest, I would still say this is a really flawed comparison.
Yeah, it's there's so many variables that are not being accounted for in any way.
So, I mean, I would say look into, science experiments as far as doing controls properly, normalizing data. I mean, if you can do this with a control and with normalized data, that would be a great start. Now, the bias and that kind of stuff, is a whole nother story.
It's a whole other thing.
And typically, whoever was conducting this experiment, it would be double blind. So whoever's providing the car doesn't know what tune is on the car, and then whoever's performing the test also doesn't know. So there's absolutely no way that the person who's conducting the test can be influenced. And you can read up about A/B testing or ABX testing.
We have customer followed to the best of their ability that procedure, testing
On the quarter
three
mile
tunes.
stuff, yeah.
No, 3 tunes on the dyno.
Okay.
Our tune and 2 other competitor tunes, same day, same condition, and all of the plots lined up damn same. Because as we've discussed in the past, peak power is
Well, this is the other thing is we talk about this all the time is making peak power or peak power at any given RPM is not that difficult.
Making a pretty dyno
Yeah,
is not
and there's that
really
too.
that difficult. It's putting it all together and making it a drivable, smooth,
Yes.
repeatable configuration on the road.
Can you drive the car hard on the road? And can you take it to the track, which is where the ultimate test is for us? And we take all of our tunes to the track and we flog them mercilessly, trying to get them to break or fail. And that's always where we see the issues in the tuning crop up is at the track.
Yep.
So yeah, you've heard the term dyno queen. It's a term for a reason because it's really not that hard to make a finicky car perform well on the dyno. How does it drive? How does it perform on the street? How does it perform on the track? What's the long-term reliability, the safety, the throttle response, the throttle control, things like that, the boost control, the smoothness. How does it run in really cold temperatures? How does it run in really hot temperatures? And so many other factors is really what tuning validity comes down to. Now we're confident that our tuning will hold up to anyone else's tuning when it comes to peak power. Again, that's the easy part. I think the first thing we do is we make peak power. That's
and
simple.
that moves around some depending on what we find in our testing and what we can do repeatedly. So again, maybe there's more on the table on a dyno pull that we chose to have a different consideration on as far as the longevity or a repeatability or in the field the car vary enough that we need to accommodate for a wider swath of calibration issues.
Two quick follow-ups. Someone says, how much variance do you see throughout the day?
A lot.
Quite a bit. It could be 5 to 10%. If it's 45 degrees in the morning and 85 degrees in the afternoon and the humidity changes and the dew point changes, you're going to see typically a huge drop in power as things warm up. And then
Quantify that power.
it could
be
be
horsepower because it's percentage. So,
but on a typical B9 3.2, it could be 5, 10, 15 wheel.
yeah, which is enough to differentiate products.
Well, that's
that's
a big part of the difference.
And this is we spend a really long time trying to isolate these variables and trying to suss out the power improvements so that we can legitimately show you what you're going to be getting at a minimum, essentially.
And this is someone asks, do SAE corrections not accommodate for this? No,
Very poorly.
Not nearly enough, and they're actually pretty bad. I think SAE, I would say typically I don't pay much attention to SAE corrections. However, I would say on normally aspirated motors, they're pretty good.
They can be pretty close. Yeah,
they can be
a
pretty
really good
close.
point. The issue you run into a lot of times with tuned setups is you're not necessarily running the same targeting method that a factory is due to other limitations. So maybe you're limiting boost at a certain point. Maybe you're limiting, you're riding a limit that's not necessarily a calculated torque limit. You have some other constraint that you're in. Your SAE numbers go out the window at that point because you're going to be making maybe the same boost as you did before because of some other limitation, which means it's a bunch more airflow because it's cooler air temp. So your SAE calculation is going to kind of go out the window.
Yeah, on turbo motors, the SAE corrections are not accurate.
Yeah, and then
They just don't.
And then if you start getting into any altitude and trying to account for that, it just is it's a mess.
When you want to talk about inflated, inaccurate dynos,
it's
use SAE corrections at elevation, which some of our competitors do.
Forced induction at elevation with SAE corrections applied is a really hard thing to do accurately.
Someone's asking why did those stock cars vary so much? Wouldn't that all be normalized once they're tuned? I'd love to do a deep dive or a study on this. I like to think someday if I'm just ridiculously rich and I'd just like to open a laboratory and just scientifically analyze various questions like this. But if I had to guess, I would say it's differences in piston ring sealing and the ability of the motor to create compression is what's doing this. Some motors could have carbon buildup or other things too that are changing the power output.
Some may be just a noisier assembly, so there's more active timing intervention being done. Just with all the rotating noise. We've come across this on literally every platform we've ever calibrated. Is you'll have some hot motors that are stand out above all the others for no reason whatsoever. You'll have a bunch that meet in the middle, and you'll have some low liars.
Yeah, but it's a fact that every factory car produces different power. And typically we see more variation than less, and we're always shocked by how two identical stock cars can make the same power. This is nothing new. I mean, I remember years ago, I remember reading an article about brand new Corvettes coming off the production line that had been broken in, that had, they're like one of the magazines took 3 relatively brand new Corvettes and drag raced them. And there was several tenths of a second difference between these identical cars. But I think, how different engines break in piston rings break in is really critical to this. How do rolling diameters affect this? They can. Any change to the tire, the rolling diameter isn't so much the issue, it's the compliance of the tire. How much is the tire insulating the torque from the roller? This is like running in sand, The best ideal would if you had a gear on the hub and it interfaced with a gear on the dyno. And there was a direct one-hole
lubricated gear interface.
Yeah.
I mean, you put it like a track tire,
like a synchro mesh.
like a performance tire is generally going to impact negatively your dyno numbers. You're going to have a gummy, sticky tire after a dyno pull because that tire's complying with the
want a
dyno
really
roller.
hard
It's
tire.
it's putting heat into the tire, which is energy that's not getting to the roller. So there's a lot of factors that come into play.